Hello, I'm Ross Atkins. Welcome to Outside Source, live from Berlin for a one-hour election special as Germany approaches the end of this election campaign and it chooses who will be the next Chancellor, and it takes another moment to say goodbye to Angela Merkel. She is approaching the curtain falling on her long political career. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the choices Germans now face. We'll also consider the issues facing voters. In 2017, it was immigration that was centre stage. This time, it's climate change.
If Germany is not sticking to what we have pledged to do, what other country would we ask to step in instead?
Next hour, we're going to hear from candidates for Germany's three biggest parties, the CDU, the SPD, and the Greens. And as the tributes continue for Angela Merkel's political career, we'll hear how one German comedian sees her relationship with Germans.
You know how Germans refer to the Chancellor, to Angela Merkel? They call her Mutti. Mutti, mommy.
Well, a warm welcome to this blustery roof garden at the top of a community centre in Berlin. We're here as we begin our coverage of the German election campaign through to the last day of voting on Sunday. And of course, a German election is always a significant moment. This is one of the most powerful countries in Europe. It's one of the most powerful countries in the world. So the selection of a new government doesn't just matter for Germans, it matters for people across the European Union and across the world. And of course, this decision has extra impact this time around. Angela Merkel's been Chancellor of this country since 2005, but she is stepping down. Germany will first choose their MPs. They will then form a coalition. That coalition will have a leader, and that leader will be the next Chancellor. It is a moment of great, great importance. We're going to explain to you all of the details of how this election works and who is involved, from the people who are standing to all of the main parties. But first of all, here's a report I made earlier on the key information we need to bear in mind as we look at this election campaign. Let's start with the main players. First of all, the man Angela Merkel would like to be her replacement. This is Armin Laschet. He's already leader of Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, the CDU. Its right of centre, its sister party in Bavaria, is the CSU. Mr. Laschet had been the favourite, but it's not going to plan. His polling was already wobbling when this happened. As Germany's president addressed the devastating floods in July, Mr. Laschet was seen laughing. That he's leader of one of the worst hit regions made the incident worse. And the comparison with Angela Merkel's empathetic response was hard to avoid. But there's more to his problems than just that, though. Deutsche Welle tells us in this profile, throughout his campaign, he's come across as vague. What many wondered, does the candidate really stand for? Well, in the latest TV debate, Mr. Laschet tried to address that.
The cohesion of Europe in these difficult times, a climate-neutral industry and strong economy, and above all, a clear course for national security.
Mr. Laschet's challenge, though, is that some voters chose the CDU because they liked Angela Merkel. They liked her pragmatic, centrist approach. She attracted people who might not normally vote right of centre. And now Armin Laschet has to try and do the same thing. But he's struggling to do that. And because of that, he's been getting help from Mrs. Merkel herself.
I ask you to do everything that you can to safeguard Germany's prosperity in the coming years, to ensure Germany's safety. And the person who can do this, who is campaigning to do this, and ready to fight passionately for this, is Armin Laschet.
That's the pitch, but the polls are offering little comfort. Look at what's happened. First of all, this is the result of the 2017 election. The CDU-CSU, sometimes called the Union, reached 35%. That was actually its worst result in 70 years, but it was still top. Then here's polling from July of this year. The CSU-CDU are on 29%. Now look at the latest polling. Well, Mr. Laschet and the CDU has been on the slide. And remarkably, having been third in July, the SPD, the Social Democrats, now find themselves in the lead. And the SPD's leader is this man, Olaf Scholz. He's the current finance minister. That's because Germany's government at the moment is a grand coalition between the two main parties. One German political scientist says of him, he's rational, stable, almost boring. This makes him very similar to Mrs. Merkel. That's right, both candidates in their own ways want voters to see them as bringing more of what Angela Merkel offered. Indeed, Mr. Scholz seems very happy to encourage this comparison. In this magazine photo, he even deployed Angela Merkel's trademark diamond hand position. Now, let's be clear, they are not one and the same. He's centre-left, Mrs. Merkel is centre-right. They are different politicians from different parties. And this is Mr. Scholz's pitch.
I will immediately bring in a minimum wage of €12, ensure stable pensions, and ensure that within the first year of government, we will have the structure in place to build a renewable energy industry with good jobs that are climate neutral.
Now, Mr. Scholz and Mr. Laschet are most likely to replace Angela Merkel, but there is one other candidate who has a chance. This is Annalena Baerbock. She's leader of the Green Party, and this is her message.
I stand for a new start that would no longer do climate protection halfway, policies that finally bring children and families to the centre, and a human rights-led foreign policy in the heart of Europe.
On Baerbock's leadership, Time magazine has described how she's bridged divides between the party's long-feuding fundamentalist and realist wings, overseeing the Greens' consolidation as a pro-business centrist party. That may be, but after briefly leading in the polls, the Greens are now back in third. Well, let's speak with Julia Ganter, editor of Berlin Pulse, which researches Germans' attitude to the world around them, and Matthew Karnichnig, chief Europe correspondent for Politico, both joining me live here in Berlin. Good to see you again, Matthew. You spoke on the programme a couple of days ago. Let me ask you both, for people who are coming to this story fresh, who haven't been following every twist and turn, what should they bear in mind when trying to understand this election campaign?
I mean, it's not only the international community that has to get used to a new face, it's also the Germans. They have experienced 16 years of chancellorship with Angela Merkel so far, and Germans are rather reluctant to change. So it's a little bit difficult for them to imagine one of the three candidates. This is also why the race in this last few days is really close.
Matthew?
I think for people outside of Europe, the important thing to remember is that this is about the leader of Europe's largest country, and this person is going to be making decisions, critical decisions, about how Germany and Europe are going to position themselves towards China, towards the United States, towards Russia. These are really pressing questions, and they're going to need to answer these in the coming years. So there's a lot at stake here beyond Germany's borders.
They're pressing questions, but correct me if I'm wrong, they're not questions that are being discussed a lot in the campaign.
Yeah, with regards to foreign policy, we haven't seen a lot of issues discussed, neither in the TV debates nor along those debates. And this might be a little bit understandable because foreign policy issues, they are not so easily relatable to the reality of a lot of Germans. To understand why the German frigate is deployed to the Indo-Pacific does not relate so easily like the question if minimum wage should be increased. So that might be an explanation for this also.
You're nodding there, Matthew.
Well, I also think that there's another aspect here which is a little more uncomfortable to talk about, which is that Germans don't want to face the reality that they have a very important place in the world. They're a very large country, relative in Europe at least, and their voice matters, and they don't want to make decisions about what to do about China. They don't want to make decisions about what to do in the transatlantic relationship, spending more money on defense, whether or not to continue to honor their nuclear obligations towards the United States and so forth. They don't want to discuss these because there's no easy answer, and it's very contentious within Germany. So the politicians don't want to confront them with those questions, and Angela Merkel has been very good over the past 16 years in shielding the population from these realities.
And it's interesting hearing you say that. I can think of lots of election campaigns I've covered where politicians' message has been, I'm the change you need. But in a strange way, the candidates in this election, to some degree, are saying, I'm not the change, I'm more of the same.
Well, I think Annalena Baerbock might be an exception for this because her campaign is really focusing on the change that Germany needs from her perspective in regards to climate change and other developments.
She's polling third at the moment, so more likely than not it'll be the two, Mr. Schulz, Mr. Laschet, who will become Chancellor, and they both seem quite keen to say, I'm a continuity candidate.
Well, they're both running on Merkel's record, and Schulz has been running with Angela Merkel's famous hand gesture, the diamond or the rhombus. So there's really a sense here that in order to win, you need to copy Merkel, which means you're going to stand for stability. You are going to try and convince the electorate that they don't have to worry about anything, that all will be okay. Germany can continue on as this sort of large Switzerland in the world as it has. And it seems to be working out for Schulz, and you can see the dramatic rise that he's had in the polls just over the past 8 weeks. It's really extraordinary by any standards, and shows that it's less about the party and more about him.
And just for those people watching, let's explain. He was down around 15-16% not so long ago, and now he's favourite to become leader of Germany. So how do we explain that turnaround?
Well, I think it really has everything to do with him, and he's somebody Germans trust. He's the finance minister. He's the former mayor of Hamburg. He's somebody they know him much better than the other two candidates. And we're seeing now, across Berlin, for example, there are posters saying, if you want Schulz, vote for the SPD. So they're basically admitting that it's not so much about the party, it's about Olaf Scholz.
Can I ask you one question, Julia, as well? When I covered the last German election, immigration was this big central issue. This time I'm being told it's climate change. But I guess the voters have to decide how serious they are about radical policies on climate change.
Yeah, right. But I have to say that from a public perspective, and when I look at the survey results of the Berlin Pulse survey, which we do annually, asking the German public about their foreign policy opinion, we see every year that migration scores as the most important topic. I mean, we haven't had data for this year yet, but it has been like this in the past few years. And of course, climate change comes next. So these are the both biggest issues. But the first one, migration, hasn't been covered a lot. It was not in the focus of the past administration. And as you've said, we haven't heard a lot about this in this campaign.
Julia and Matthew, for the moment, thank you very much for joining us on Outside Source. So we've been talking about climate change. As we've been hearing, it's right up there for German voters as one of the main drivers in deciding who they're going to back. Our correspondent here in Berlin is Jenny Hill, and she's made this report on just that subject.
It's getting harder for Germans to ignore climate change. The fairy tale forests which carpet this country are dying. This bug, which proliferates in warmer, drier conditions, is boring into and killing the weakened trees. Nothing the foresters can do but cut down the affected trees, try to stop the spread.
We never thought the forest would react so quickly to climate change. What shocked us was that it wasn't just the conifers that were so badly affected, but also old oak and beech trees.
Time's running out for the planet and for Germany's Green Party, which had high hopes for this election. Support's grown in recent years, boosted by younger voters. But their Chancellor candidate, Annalena Baerbock, is lagging behind in the polls.
There's no doubting how passionately many Germans feel about climate change, but that alone, it seems, may not be enough to put Annalena Baerbock into the Chancellery.
This, after all, is the country which invented the motor car. Some worry about the pace of change, how to protect the environment without killing off industry.
I would like to know who's going to pay for all this. If the car industry gets kneecapped and tens, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million people lose their jobs, maybe there should be a slower solution. Together perhaps we can slow down global warming, but when I see China opening up 200 airports and 1,000 coal power stations, I do wonder how small Germany is supposed to save the world.
It's widely acknowledged Angela Merkel hasn't done enough to tackle climate change, despite her initial efforts to address the problem on the world stage. But Germany's politicians have come under pressure from a new generation of activists. Most parties have tailored their manifestos. After this summer's deadly floods, they know voters' priorities are changing.
None of the parties really have enough measures to reach the goals of climate protection. Only the Greens have a larger amount of measures which come close to the goals and the emission targets we have to do and have to reach, the others not.
They come close, but
they come close.
Still not sufficient.
It's still not sufficient.
In the German forest, they're replanting different species, which they hope will prove more resistant to a warmer, drier future. Change, it seems, inevitable for a country which must now decide how best to safeguard its future. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Mainz.
Well, there's Jenny with a report on climate change. And let me show you these live pictures from German TV right now. It's a debate happening here in Berlin as I speak to you. It's being billed as the final round, and it features the leaders of all of the main parties in the Bundestag. Just to be clear, there have already been 3 TV debates already, but they featured the leaders of the big 3, the CDU, the SPD and the Greens. This time there are 4 others featuring as well. We have the FDP candidate for Chancellor, Christian Lindner. He's what you might call a conservative liberal. Alice Weidel from the far-right AfD. We have the left party's Janine Wissler and Markus Söder from the CDU in Bavaria. That's the sister party of Angela Merkel's CDU. So it's a busy old stage, 7 leaders in total. Let's bring Julia and Matthew back in. This is one of the last chances these leaders have to communicate at scale with Germans. What kind of tactical manoeuvres are you looking out for?
Well, I think for Laschet, he clearly has to go directly after Scholz. He needs to kind of score a knockout blow here, which is unlikely, but it might be his last hope. He's a couple of points behind where the CDU, CSU is in the polls, in the most generous polls that we're seeing now. He's within the margin of error. It's looking unlikely that he'll be able to really close the gap, but tonight would present an opportunity for him to go on the attack.
And to explain to our viewers, even if he doesn't come first, even if the CDU were second, that doesn't rule out the possibility he becomes Chancellor.
Not at all. It makes it a little bit more difficult because you get into questions of who has the credibility to build a coalition. But right. The closer he is to the SPD, if they're both at about 24, 25%, it becomes easier for him to justify trying to form a coalition around the winner of the election, the SPD. And that's why these coming coalition talks are going to be really so crucial.
Julie, what are you looking out for in this?
I mean, I agree with Matthew that he has to attack Scholz, and I would add that, I mean, his continuous references to the option of a red-red-green government is really what a lot of conservative voters
And just to explain, this is the possibility that the far-left party would work with the centre-left party, and that's something that for conservatives is scary, Mr. Laschet would say.
I mean, it would be scary for conservative voters in his rhetoric. If it's really likely that this is going to happen, at least from a foreign policy perspective, is really a difficult question because their positions, they're very vast in a lot of areas like NATO, but also with regards to other topics.
Julia and Matthew, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us on this blustery evening. If you're just tuning in, we're on a roof garden. It's a beautiful roof garden. It's a bit of a breezy evening here in Berlin, but we don't mind about that. There's lots of politics to talk about as Germany heads to its final day of voting on Sunday and then the results on Sunday night. Now, we're going to be speaking to candidates from all of the top 3 parties in the polls. They're all going to be under 35 years of age. Let's begin with the candidate for Angela Merkel's party, the CDU. Wiebke Winter is standing for the Bundestag in the city of Bremen in the north of Germany.
I'm very happy to live in Germany because I think that our government has done a great job in the past 16 years. We have come through the pandemic very well. The CDU has proven more than once that it can handle crises. We have a strong economy, and now we have many challenges, for example, to become climate neutral, but we will face them and we will keep our prosperity. We will keep our economy, and we will get there with everybody in the society and not just certain groups. I'm campaigning as hard as I can because I also want to become a member of parliament, and I'm not giving up until Sunday that maybe we'll reach the 30% again. However, of course, we are in a state where we don't want to be. I don't really know why that happened. I think that, of course, many people are thinking about who to choose from the parties, especially as Angela Merkel is not running for chancellor again. But we will keep on fighting. And right now, there's a trend in Germany which helps us to become the strongest party in Germany again.
Well, Wiebke Winter is 25 years old. She's the CDU's youngest candidate. And just like many, many young Germans, climate change is a central issue for her. The question is the CDU the right party to address those challenges? Here she is on that.
So it's true that there hasn't been done enough for the climate crisis, but not from any party and not in any region in Germany. So we need to be more ambitious. And now we have to think about the way how to become climate neutral in Germany and the whole world. And there are different paths to climate neutrality. And the Green Party, for example, they want to prohibit a lot of things like driving fast. And our way to get to climate neutrality is using our economy. We call it soziale Marktwirtschaft. So our social economy, which is a concept that we're using here in Germany. And it says that we mostly count on our economy to get the market in the right direction, because renewable energy is just much cheaper than fossil energy, for example, coal, and also more expensive than nuclear energy.
Now, Shahak Shapira is a German-Israeli comedian. This is going to be the first election he'll be able to vote in since he moved to Germany. He's been doing stand-up comedy here for years. Here he is in action.
I regret getting vaccinated now that I know that you can get a free sausage for it. So in the east of Germany, we're like, hey, if you come down and you get vaccinated, you will get a free bratwurst. You know how well it worked? Very well. This country's like a bunch of 5-year-olds, right? You know how Germans refer to the chancellor, to Angela Merkel? They call her Mutti. Mutti, mommy. This woman has been ruling Germany for like 300 years now.
I've been speaking to Shahak Shapira about that relationship that Germans have with their leader.
I feel like Merkel kind of basically removed politics from politics. It's incredible. I don't know what's going to happen to Germany without Angela Merkel, because Germans have a very unhealthy relationship to her, to Angela Merkel. You know how they refer
How so?
You know how they refer to Angela Merkel,
Yeah.
Germans? They refer to her as Mutti.
Yeah.
It's mommy. That can't be good. You know, I feel like this makes me think the next chancellor must be a woman, because I'm not going to call my next chancellor daddy. That's
Well, presumably you don't want to be calling your next chancellor mummy or daddy.
Hopefully. But I feel like Angela Merkel kind of, you know, this is kind of what, it wasn't only, there's a reason Germans name her this way. They start pretending like they're being mommed by their chancellor.
But I suppose when I look at that, I think, well, Angela Merkel is a particular politician. Germany has had a particular experience with her. Maybe Germany is just going back to the kind of politics everyone else has had for the last 16 years.
It's kind of like I don't know what's gonna happen. It feels like we're not only voting for a new chancellor, but also for the idea of having a chancellor again, because it feels like Merkel just been, she's been running things.
And when you think about who you want to be the next chancellor, what's on your list in terms of the issues that matter most?
Well, I want someone who's not on the right, because I can't. Look, I'm from Israel. I can't vote for someone who's on the right. I want a person who is who doesn't lose focus of the important things. The important things are not debating for hours how we should gender things on TV, but how can we prevent the world from burning down in a few decades?
And given that is one of your main criteria, the whole world not burning down, are you finding things to laugh about? Are Germans ready to laugh about politics?
Are Germans ready to laugh about anything? They're not very...
Well, you're the man to tell me what the answer to that question.
Well, I've been doing comedy in English for the last 2 years, so I don't know if that's a good answer, but are Germans willing to laugh about anything? Maybe about a lot of things except for themselves, I guess. I don't know. I love laughing about the world burning down. I feel like there's tragedies where humor blossoms, but it's not. It doesn't mean I want a politician that will take us there.
Well, I guess the point about Merkel was that she offered this very stable, very calm style of leadership, which maybe didn't lend itself to laughs.
No, it didn't. But that's not what you look for. You don't
want your leader to make you laugh.
I'm not voting as a comedian.
And he never did tell me which way he's going to vote. Now stay with me here in Berlin. Back in a minute with another half hour of this special on the German election.
Good evening. It's been an unusually warm September so far. We've got a few more warm days to come as we head towards the weekend. And for many of us, today was a pretty warm affair, particularly down towards the south. 23 degrees for central and southern parts of the UK. Compare that with just 10 this afternoon across a good part of Shetland. We had this lozenge of cold air that worked its way in. It was pretty windy earlier on as well. But that doesn't last. We see the winds going round to westerlies, indeed southerly winds by the weekend, bringing plenty of warm and humid weather our way. Now, as we head through this evening, some pretty heavy rain is going to move across the Northern Isles. That will then clear. We see lots of cloud feeding in across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, some spots of rain with that, some mist and murk as well. We will see some clear spells further south, allowing it to get a little bit chilly in places. The majority will hold up in double digits. And for tomorrow, low pressure to the north of us, high pressure to the south, driving a westerly wind. You can see quite a few isobars on the chart, especially across the northern half of the UK. That shows that the wind will be quite strong and will feed a lot of cloud in across western Scotland, northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe the southwest as well. But eastern Scotland should see some spells of sunshine, and with some shelter from that westerly wind, temperatures in parts of Aberdeenshire are likely to get to 20 or 21 degrees. And further south, sunnier parts of England and Wales likely to get up to 23, maybe 24 degrees. Quite unusual for this time of year. Now, as we head into the weekend, we've got one little frontal system trying to push up from the south. That could introduce some showers into the forecast. Quite a lot of cloud around as well on Saturday, but we will see a few sunny spells here and there. I think the best of the sunshine likely to develop across northern Scotland. And again, those temperatures in the high teens or low 20s quite widely. For the second half of the weekend, we do see a frontal system starting to squash its way in from the west, and that will start to strengthen the winds. So an increasingly brisk southerly wind blowing during Sunday. Greater chance of seeing some showers through the day on Sunday. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine as well. But late in the day, that weather front makes its move and will turn things wet, especially across parts of Northern Ireland. But ahead of that, another relatively warm day with highs of 23 degrees.
Here we are. Click.
Click. Let's do this.
Zip it up and activate it.
Click.
Click. Click.
Let's go.
Oh, this is cool.
Algorithm. Facebook.
Twitter.
Data.
YouTube. Zoom.
Microsoft Teams. AI connected container farm.
Wireless 4G network on the moon. That sounds great.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
or
The perfect pizza.
absolutely nuts.
If this were a human being, I'd be sticking a mirror under its nose to check that it was breathing.
That was quite bizarre.
Pop the headset back on and enjoy the view.
How cool was that? Lasers.
Oh, that was a bit of fun.
Your weekly tech update. Click, Saturday and Sunday at 12:30 on the BBC News Channel.
Gordon and I were as close as two people could be in politics.
We had this shared ideal that we could create a Labour Party that was once again capable of winning elections.
When it was good, we were unbeatable.
They had a huge mutual respect.
Gordon and Tony had different visions of New Labour. In the end, that's politics.
Blair and Brown, the New Labour Revolution. Coming soon to BBC Two and iPlayer.
Hello, I'm Ros Atkins. Welcome back to Outside Source, live here on a roof garden in Berlin. This is a one-hour election special as we look at the German election campaign building up to the last day of voting on Sunday. And by Sunday night, we'll have a good idea of how things are shaking down and who may be able to replace Angela Merkel, because the German Chancellor is finally approaching the end of a very successful and long political career. We'll reflect on that and her legacy. Right now, as I'm talking to you on German TV, all 7 leaders from the parties in the Bundestag are on German TV having a final debate together. This is an important chance, in particular for the CDU leader, Armin Laschet, to try and make some inroads into the SPD's leads. We're also considering the issues that voters care about the most. In 2017, it was certainly immigration. That's still a factor, but climate change is now centre stage as well.
If Germany is not sticking to what we have pledged to do, what other country would we ask to step in instead?
We're speaking to candidates from all of the 3 top parties in the polls. We've already heard from the CDU. In the next half an hour, we'll hear from the SPD and the Greens. It's a breezy autumn evening here in Berlin as we consider the German election. The candidates, the parties, the system, the possible governments that could emerge. And this could get tight. And the smaller parties, who definitely won't be the biggest, are still major players, because in the end, we're going to end up with a coalition government. No one party will win a majority on its own. Let's have a look at the process of how members of the Bundestag are elected. Germans cast 2 votes, one for a local MP, one for a political party. At least 598 members are elected by these 2 votes. Then half of the Bundestag is made up of local MPs, half are elected from party lists, based on the percentage of the overall vote that the parties receive. Then the Bundestag is set and coalition talks begin. Now, these coalitions in Germany have all sorts of funny names: traffic lights, Jamaica, Kiwi. They all refer to the different colours of the parties. And eventually, a coalition emerges that has over 50% of MPs. That coalition then chooses the Chancellor. So that's the system which all of the parties are having to navigate. All of them have got positions on climate change. And one group which isn't standing for office but is relevant is Fridays for Future, the movement that Greta Thunberg started, which is now big in lots of European countries. And here in Germany, the woman who leads it is Luisa Neubauer. She's a climate activist, but Fridays for Future and Luisa Neubauer don't support any of the main political parties. I've been asking her why.
Of course, we're asking people to, look closely at what the parties are actually, proposing. But given that nothing is sufficient, we are turning to the people. We are turning to all generations, and we're asking them to rise up. As politics and parties are again failing us, we need to rise up and increase the pressure for them to actually do the job.
What do you say to politicians like Armin Laschet from the CDU, who says that Germany can't do this alone? Germany can't change its economy and its climate policies unless the European Union moves, unless other major other major emitters move, like the US and China. What do you say to that?
Well, that's not a very unique thought that no one can do it by itself. But that's not what we're talking about. The Paris Agreement has been signed by countries across the globe. And the question is now, does everyone do the job? But if Germany is not sticking to what we have pledged to do, what other country would we ask to step in instead? Everyone has to do their fair share. That's something you kind of learn in kindergarten. That's how teamwork works. And you also learn in kindergarten that you don't break your promises. And right now, all countries in the world are basically breaking their promises and finger pointing at each other. That's not going to solve anything. We are not asking anyone, and we're not asking any party to do it by itself. We are just asking them to stick to what they've said and promised.
One of Germany's most high-profile climate activists saying she'll not be backing any of the parties. You might be thinking she'll be backing the Green Party, but she says no. Let's try and understand that. Anna Emmerdale is a Green Party candidate for the Bundestag here in the state of Brandenburg, which contains Berlin. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Are you surprised that a climate activist like that wouldn't support you?
Fridays for Future is a civil movement, it's a youth movement, and they know that climate change is not a project for one party. We need all parties together to make it possible to limit global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we, as the Green Party, make the offer. We propose an ambitious climate change program, climate protection program. And I understand that they don't support one party because it's a project for everybody.
And what is your programme? Can you give me the headlines of what your party would do if it was in government?
Yeah, we need to implement a climate protection government in the first few days of the new, after Sunday. And that includes, at first, an immense expansion of the renewables capacities and a coal phase out until 2030. It also includes that our whole economy must be transformed towards a circular and towards a carbon neutral economy. And that's only possible with a massive amount of renewable energies, for example, also to produce green hydrogen, which we need for the industry, for example.
Just to put that in context for people watching, the CDU says it would finish coal by 2038. You're saying do it by 2030. But the CDU, Angela Merkel's party, argues Germany can't do this on its own. If it makes all the changes you're suggesting, but the rest of the European Union and the rest of the world doesn't move, Germany will be at a disadvantage, it will lose money, it will not be as competitive, and Germans will lose their jobs. What do you say to that?
Yes, both the CDU and the SPD say we cannot leave the coal before 2030, and we are the only ones, together with the Left Party.
But you're saying that whatever Germany does needs to be done with the European Union. It needs to be done collectively. Germany shouldn't do this on its own.
Germany isn't doing it on its own. We just have the clear agenda that we can leave the coal until 2030, and we are the only party, together with the lefts, that say so. And we see that both these parties, they deny that we can do it, and that the most players, the global players in the industries, they demand the German legislation to create the respective political frameworks to make it possible. It's actually not the task of climate activists or the industry to make German politics climate neutral, but that is what we see at the moment, and we as Green Party, we suggest our climate protection program, which clearly says we can do it and we should do it for sure with our European and the international partners.
Anna, thank you very much indeed for joining us on BBC. We appreciate it. So that's the pitch from the Green Party. It's currently polling third. It was polling first for a while in the summer, but still a clear third. So we've heard from the Greens, we've heard from Angela Merkel's CDU party. Next, let's hear from the Social Democrats. Top in the polls at the moment, Yi-Won Rhee is standing for the Bundestag in the German city of Aachen. It's in the west of the country, and she's live with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Why do you think your party has done so well in the last 2 months? What's changed?
Hi. First of all, thanks for having me. I think the people really like that we went very steady. We didn't change our course. We went into having one strategy for the whole campaign, and we stick to it. And especially having COVID-19, having the floods in Germany, the people really want to have somebody who knows how to handle crisis. And I guess Olaf Scholz is the one who is projecting that to the people.
And what are you going to be doing to protect German workers? Because the CDU says that some of your plans are too expensive and will damage the German economy.
Well, if like the CDU, we would talk about cutting taxes and promising people who are earning a lot of money to cut their taxes, their income taxes, that would cost a lot of money. But we are going the other way around. We are saying that we want to have the middle class and everybody who is having a low income, we want to protect them, and we want to keep their taxes steady, and we want to charge the ones with the higher income with more taxes. So I guess that's the only difference, that why we could do all those things that we promised for the workers. I think that the most important thing is that we promised to have the minimum wage. We would raise it up to €12 an hour. There would be a lot of pay raises for around 10 million people in Germany, and that would be something that we really want to do for the workers.
Yuan, can I ask you a more personal question? I know your parents moved from South Korea many years ago. What's your view of the experience of immigrants in Germany? Has it changed since the last election?
It certainly has changed. There are a lot more people being aware of what it means to be a BPOC. It's a global thing, so a lot of people really want to have their own voice, to get their own voice even in politics. So there are a lot of migrants or children of migrants who are running for office right now. It's getting more diverse. I hopefully in the German Bundestag. So I really hope that will be the case. So that society is represented in the German Parliament.
Yuan Rhee from the Social Democrats. Thank you very much indeed. So we've heard from candidates from the three parties polling highest at the moment, from the Christian Democrats, Angela Merkel's party, from the Social Democrats. Just heard from them. They're currently top. Their leader, Olaf Scholz, is favourite to take over from Angela Merkel. And we've heard from the Greens. They're third in the polls, but they could be crucial in deciding what coalition government emerges. In a few minutes' time, we're going to take some minutes to look at Germany's place on the world stage and how that fits in for whichever new leader we're left with. Now, when Germans last voted in a general election in 2017, immigration was a huge issue. Over 1 million refugees had come into Germany during Europe's refugee crisis. I've been speaking to two men who came to Germany from Syria, Ayed and Mahmoud.
Well, I'm trying to keep an eye on this election because in the last election I wasn't in Germany actually, because I arrived since 2 years. So I can't unfortunately vote now, but I'm trying to keep an eye on this election. Maybe in the next one I will be able to vote.
And the issue of refugees was huge at the last election. Do you see it being so big this time?
No, I think there's like a shift in the focus points from in 2017. I remember when I arrived into Germany in 2014, and then we saw what happened in 2015, and then in 2017 that was the main topic, the migration, the open doors policy that was implemented in 2015, and then Angela Merkel said, "Wir schaffen das, we can do it." And all that, it was like the main topic for the parties and the elections. Now I think interest is shifted a little bit, more into international politics, I guess, more into global warming as well. It's a very important topic at the moment. So yeah, I think there's like a huge shift in the topics of the.
We were talking just now, neither of you can vote, is that right? Not this time?
Not yet.
Maybe next time?
Maybe next time.
I hope so, yeah.
But if you could vote, do you know which party you would support?
For me, I didn't decide yet. That's why I'm keeping an eye on this election. Maybe within the next one I will have like a whole idea of each party.
I would go for the Greens, I guess.
Because of climate change or because of other policies?
Climate change, of course, but also their policies about migration and refugees in general, because they want to initiate more policies regarding
Hello, I'm Ross Atkins with Outside Source here in a roof garden in Berlin as we cover the German election campaign. It's about who becomes the next chancellor, because this is also the end of a political era. Angela Merkel is ending the last few weeks or months of her time in charge. Now, this election is, of course, about the future of Germany, but it's not just about Germany, because when one of the world's major powers changes leaders after 16 years, well, of course, that's going to have knock-on effects all around the world. I've had a look at what those effects could be. My first reason this election matters is Germany's role in the European Union. Jean-Claude Juncker is the former president of the European Commission, and he argues that Merkel has helped set Germany's path on this issue.
She developed a kind of, in the noble sense of the word, a European feeling. After Angela Merkel, there will be no other German chancellor not being pro-European.
Maybe, but that doesn't mean Germany's approach to the EU is set in stone. And as with many elements of this election, Germany and the EU is about the new leader, but it's also about the leader who's leaving. Because take the current European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Well, for many years she served as a minister in Angela Merkel's cabinet. As Politico writes, von der Leyen is losing more than a close ally. She's also losing a political mentor and someone who backed her, even in tough times. The new Chancellor must establish a new relationship with Brussels, and at a crucial time, because on issues of defence, climate, monetary policy and more, big decisions await for the EU. That's one reason this election matters. Here's a second. Take a look at this chart. Germany remains by far the biggest CO2 emitter in the EU. Critics of Angela Merkel say Germany just hasn't done enough to phase out coal. And climate change is certainly a key electoral issue this time, especially for younger voters.
Now we have to stand up and say, okay, stop driving cars, stop flying to holiday, because we need to reduce the emissions, which is right. But we should have also already done this like 50 years ago and not just now.
The new government will now decide how Germany takes on climate change. And then my third reason this election matters is that Germany is working out how it fits into the world. This week, my colleague Hugh Schofield wrote how the French are pushing the Germans to get over their 20th century complexes and act like the power they really are. The issue has been far from visible in the televised leadership debates. The three main candidates have met to debate several times. Issues like climate change, taxation and coronavirus vaccines have come up. But broader questions about Germany's place in the world have not. Annette de Tert is a German correspondent based in London. She noted, another debate without a word on foreign or defence policy, a whole country still in denial of its role as a global player and the responsibility that comes with that. That responsibility, though, is perhaps well understood outside of Germany. Joe Biden acknowledged as much when bidding farewell to Angela Merkel.
Thank you for speaking out for what is right and for never failing to defend human dignity. And I want to thank you for your continued support for the long-standing goal of a Europe whole, free and at peace.
Perhaps it's the nature of all elections that foreign policy takes a back seat. But behind the urgency of domestic politics, a great unresolved question remains. What kind of global power does Germany want to be? That's why, once the voting has happened, the coalition's been agreed and the Chancellor's been chosen, Germany's next step matters for all of us. That's why I'll be watching. And if you want to watch, remember, I'll be live with you on the BBC News channel in the UK and on BBC New World News everywhere else in the world with an election special on Sunday evening from Berlin as those results start to come through and we start to understand the nature of a government that may replace the current one and who might lead that. But for a moment, let's stop looking forwards And let's look back a little and consider the political powerhouse that leads this country at the moment, Angela Merkel. She's finishing her 16 years as Chancellor of Germany. Angela Dorothea Kasner was the name she grew up under. At the time, it was in East Germany, in the town of Templin, about 80, 90 kilometers from Berlin. And it was there that she developed her collected and calm demeanor and, in words of one biographer, learned to keep quiet. That biographer said the mystery that is Merkel has its roots in that doomed republic, according to Stefan Cornelius. And in the 1970s, she studied physics at Karl Marx University, where she met her first husband, whose name she kept even after their divorce in 1982. She was awarded the doctorate for her thesis on quantum chemistry in 1986. Recently, the pandemic gave her the opportunity to reflect on that time in East Germany.
Für jemanden wie mich, für die Reise und
Rest assured, for someone like me, for whom travel and freedom of movement are a hard-won right, such restrictions are only legitimately established in cases of absolute need.
Well, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, Angela Merkel joined the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU. It's the party that she's come to dominate, and she did so in less than a decade. That same year, she won a seat in the Bundestag, and she was eventually appointed Minister for Women. She went on to become Environment Minister, presiding over the first UN climate conference in Berlin. 1998 was a big year for Angela Merkel. She was elected Secretary General of the CDU, and she married her longtime companion, the chemistry professor Joachim Sauer. This is a picture of the two of them some 10 years earlier. And 2005 was the year that changed the course of German politics. Angela Merkel was sworn in as Chancellor on November the 22nd. She became the first woman and the first East German and the youngest person at the age of 51 to hold that office. Here's the journalist Alice Schwarzer.
Sie ist ja eigentlich ein Unfall.
She is actually a bit of an accident. Germany wasn't really ready for a female chancellor. And when she was elected with a 500,000 vote majority, the former Chancellor Schröder went on television and said, "She isn't up to this, I will carry on." And then followed utterly scandalous weeks where in this democratic Germany there was a serious discussion by everyone, the media, her own party, whether this elected woman could really become Chancellor.
Well, Angela Merkel went on to become arguably the most powerful woman in the world. Some say the most powerful figure in the history of the European Union too. Here she is as the only female leader at the G7 summit in 2007. 10 years later, not much had changed. This is from a summit she hosted in Hamburg in 2017. And Chancellor Merkel has been the steady hand through a series of disasters, from the Eurozone crisis to the refugee crisis to COVID-19. Here she is taking a selfie with a refugee after visiting a reception centre in 2015. She tackled every crisis with what Germans saw as a cool head, made all the more obvious when, shall we say, she was dealing with leaders of a very different temperament.
At least we have something in common, perhaps.
Well, let's consider Angela Merkel some more with Kate Brady, who joins me live from here in Berlin. Kate, is it fair to say that Angela Merkel has really reshaped the way politics works in Germany? The very nature of political discourse seems to be in her form.
It really has changed the way that politics works here. And if anything, I think it was in The Economist this week, she was described as having tranquilized German politics, and I think that is very much what has happened. And we can even see this in the polls right now, this fragmentation just a couple of days before German voters cast their ballots, because many of the parties, no one's really sure what they all stand for individually anymore. Many of them all following similar manifestos, similar party programs, and that's something that we really saw happen and carried out by Merkel firsthand over the past 16 years. Particularly when it comes to the relationship between her party, the CDU-CSU, or the Union, the Conservative Union, and with the Social Democrats, the SPD. And those two blocs, the Social Democrats and Conservatives, were in a governing coalition, a grand coalition, they call it, as Germany's two traditionally big tent parties, for 12 of Merkel's 16 years in office. And what we saw happen was Merkel move her Conservatives further and further and further towards the centre line of Germany's political spectrum, all the while snatching up many of the Social Democrats' main party stances and points and policy points. And so in the end, you had the Social Democrats in a real identity crisis for a long, long time. They ended up again back in another grand coalition with Merkel's Conservatives in the last election, but still that has the way that she has governed, cherry picking in a way, points from different parties, different policy points from different parties, has led to this stagnation now among many of Germany's biggest front-running parties.
And how you're describing it's reminding me of a phrase a comedian I interviewed earlier used, that she took the politics out of politics. And I guess what we're seeing now is the politics going back into politics. Germans are going to have to get used to something that lots of our viewers around the world experience every day with their politicians.
Absolutely, and this is something that German voters are simply not used to. If there is one thing that German voters love, it is stability. Even this hand gesture, the Merkel Raute, the Merkel rhombus, has become synonymous with Merkel's presence, not only here in Germany, but European-wide and on the world stage as well. And it seems that it's only really now that it's dawning on German voters, with just a couple of days to go, that they now have to vote for someone who isn't Merkel. And we're seeing that effect as well on the CDU's ratings right now.
Okay, I'm going to jump in only because we're right at the end of the programme, but you're right. Germans are now very much considering their options. We know there are a lot of undecided voters, which makes this election even more interesting. Kate Brady, thank you very much. A quick reminder, we will be bringing you live results and analysis in our German elections news special on Sunday. Join me from 15:30 GMT as Germans vote to decide who's going to lead their country, who will make up their next government. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. Do join me for that. I'll see you then. All the best.